there's basic concepts in LimaCharlie that are important to understand. So you have users. So a user is literally an email, right? Anybody that goes on app.limacharlie.io can create a user. It's free. It's not specifically tied to an organization or a company or an MSSP or any of those things. It's just a user. It's authentication. Then we have organizations. So an organization is another big unit. That's really the tenant level that we talk about. So when you configure multi-tenant, so if you're an MSSP and you have a customer, they're likely going to be an organization within LimaCharlie. And that's what allows you to configure it at that level, but also, get usage at that level, get billing at that level. If you want to create one, like delete one, somebody, decides to go somewhere else, like it's very easy, but like that's the tenant unit. And an organization does not like automatically belong to a user or to a company, but it's kind of the unit itself. And then as the creator of this organization, you will then begin to have access. You're the first person to have access to it, and then you can choose how you want to grant other users or API keys or all that stuff, which we'll talk about, how you want to grant access to that organization. So the users and organizations are kind of two different, objects in the LimaCharlie ecosystem. Permissions, pretty straightforward. We have a ton of different permissions for different types of activities. That will be like, I don't know, sensor.list to list the sensors, all the way to, like detections.get, or I'm paraphrasing, they have a specific name. But it's fairly straightforward. Permission is just kind of this, the ability to talk to specific APIs, essentially, in LimaCharlie with regards to a specific org. API keys. So API keys, again, are pretty normal concept. We have two types of API keys in LimaCharlie. So by default, an API key is going to be scoped at a single organization. So you can go into your brand new organization, create API keys, and they will be only applicable to that one organization. So you're going to create the key, you're going to give it permissions, and that's going to be only available to that org. It operates on a single org. The other type of key is user-based API keys. So that is the ability to say, as a user on the LimaCharlie platform, I create an API key that will represent all of my access. So this API key will have access to all of the organization and the sets of permissions that I have access to as a user. So, it can be a lot more powerful. It's also, a lot more sensitive. But this is kind of a good way to create an API key that you can use in a pretty broad sense as an MSSP across all of your organizations, for example. And we'll get into, how all those concepts map into, here's a good way to proceed forward. The last concept is an Orga Group. So to help a little bit visualize that, I will switch here to to a diagram. It's a little bit of a crude diagram. So you can see here in the top left, we have a representation of an org. So as I mentioned, it's kind of its own object. An org can have users associated to it. So I can say, let's say I create an organization. I can say, John has the user John, at corp.com has access to this organization, and with the following permissions. So in a very kind of one-to-one fashion. So I can assign it directly to an organization. And that's kind of an easy way to just, get started. If you're just playing, experimenting with LimaCharlie, that's the best way. So, however, as you can imagine, no screen share. Really? My bad. Manual mode. So here we go. All right. Sorry about that. So Like I was saying, the top left here is the organization. You can see I have a bunch of users, each with their kind of sets of permissions. Then, at the bottom here, you can see we have some users, right? They're each their own object. Well, as you can imagine, if you're trying to manage this at scale, that won't work so well, right? If you're trying to, you have a new analyst coming in, if you're an MSSP, you have a new analyst coming in and you want to give them access to, the 50 orgs, your 50 customers, going one by one is kind of a pain, and it's not the greatest way of managing permissions and access. So the concept that comes to the rescue is this Orga Group concept. So the Orga Group takes sets of a couple of the different objects and kind of it encompasses it in one way to manage it. So an Org group will have a set of users. So and I'll show you what that looks like, but you have an Org group, you say, here's the users that are part of this group. An Org group also has members, so member organizations to this group. So those are orgs that are part of this group. Finally, an Org group has permissions. So that's a set of permissions that are part of this group. And all of this put together essentially tells LimaCharlie that all the users in this group have all the permissions in this group to all of the member organizations in this group. So you can kind of see it in a way like a role. Usually it's reused as a role within your MSSP. So you may have an org group that is for analysts. So you say, my analysts internally need the following permissions to do their job, and they need to do them on all of my, my general kind of organized customers, that I maintain. And here's a list of all of my analysts, so that when I have a new analyst coming in, I can just add them to that group, and then they automatically get all the relevant permissions to everything else. All those groups and the permissions that are at the org level are additive. So that means a group won't remove permissions from another one. That means you can create exceptions quite easily. Let's say that you're an MSSP and one of your customers want direct access to their organization. You don't have to create a group just for them. They may not be part of any of your groups. Really, that makes kind of sense. But you can go directly into that one organization and add them there. So they get access to that one organization. But for the rest, maybe it's your admins, your auditors, the people with read-only access, or operators. Then you can create groups and you can manage it at that top level. That makes it a lot easier to manage. So that's kind of all of the components of user access control.